I love that. So cool. Hey, gang. Merry Christmas to you all, one and all. Welcome to our 2024 Christmas party live stream. Boy, this has been a long week, but a wonderful way to wrap up the week. We'll do one more live stream tomorrow before our wonderful Christmas celebration. This is, I have to say, it's my favorite moment of the year. We've got an amazing show for you tonight. My goal tonight, I'm just going to be, let's just cut to the chase. Here's my goal. I've got a gigantic goal. I want you to experience Christmas tonight like you never experienced it before. I hope to keep that promise to you. My goal is for you to experience Christmas like you never experienced before, and I am going to appeal to your moral imagination to fulfill that promise. Before we dive in, I would be remiss if I didn't give a huge shout out to our mutual sponsor this evening from shopbeam.com, particularly their wonderful Beam Dream, which knocks me out every single night. I'm a horrible sleeper. Many of you know this because I know a lot of you go to Beam Dream. You purchased it. Go to shopbeam.com. And I can't turn my brain off. And actually, the more I read, the worse it gets. But one nice hot cup of Beam Dream, particularly their brownie batter flavor with a little cream in it, I'm gone, man. I'm out like light, and I just love it. Click on that link below, or where's that glorious QR code? There it is. Click on that link below, or scan that QR code on the screen to get the best sleep of your life. And for this Christmas season only, not only are you going to get an amazing Merry discount, but you'll also get 3 months free of our very own Courageous Conservatives Club. I kid you not. You are going to get 3 months free of our Courageous Conservatives Club, where you have access to our special live Q&As, as well as all kinds of exclusive content. So click that link below or scan the QR code right now and get this wonderful discount for any items on the shopbeam.com store. Again, you got to try this Beam Dream. If you have a hard time sleeping at night, I am telling you, you know what? After we're done, I'm going to go have a nice cup of hot, warm, sweet Beam Dream, and I'll be out within an hour. I'm kid you not. This stuff is amazing. Click on that link below or scan that QR code. And you're also going to get, in addition to a wonderful Christmas discount, you're going to get 3 months free to our very own Courageous Conservatives Club. So make sure you click on that link below or scan that QR code right now. Speaking of, if you are a member of our Courageous Conservatives Club, if you'd like to ask me any questions before we close this evening, I will be happy to answer that. So if you are not a member of our Courageous Conservatives Club, well, then all you got to do is click on that link below, or you could go to fight.turleytalks.com/join, and you can ask me your questions, and I'll be happy to answer them. As you may have figured it out, if you don't know, our super chats have been disabled. We've unfortunately been demonetized completely and totally by Google, YouTube. So the way we survive is by you guys, by our sponsors, and by you guys, your support over at fight.turleytalks.com/join. So it would be an honor to have you as a member of our Courageous Conservatives Club. And also you get to ask me your questions as well. I'll be happy to answer them at the end of our live stream, or towards the end of the live stream this evening. Okay, and now I do want to let you in on something. I thought this Christmas party would be the perfect time to do so. I'm going to be doing something very, very big in 2025. That's right, huge. Something big is coming, and it's going to be unlike anything you've seen before. What if I told you there's an event coming up that will uncover opportunities shaping a new era of prosperity and hope in America? That you'll hear from some incredibly influential voices and thought leaders sharing insights you won't find anywhere else. Gang, this is going to be absolutely huge, and it's going to spark conversations. It's going to inspire action, and it's going to change the way you see the future. Imagine being part of something that could literally define the next chapter of our story, right? A moment you'll look back on and say, I was there. I'll be giving you more details next week. Keep an eye on this channel. You are not going to want to miss it, and I'll leave you with that tease. Let's have some Christmas cheer here. It's become a bit of a tradition at Turley Talks at this time of year for me to take a deep dive and explore some of the most amazing, fascinating, timeless themes in what is, I believe, the most wonderful Christmas classic of them all, A Christmas Carol by the one and only Charles Dickens. It's a story that really is without parallel in its own right. It's one of the most wonderful stories ever written, bar none. And a lot of people don't realize it, but it's filled with deeply profound Christian themes all throughout the story. And I know that discovering these themes, these motifs, these symbols will serve to really enrich your Christmas and your future Christmases with this amazing story like never before. That's what I hope to do for you tonight. I hope to just make this story just so delectable and so sweet for you, and to give you such an awesome appreciation of the beauty and the majesty and the glories of Christmas that only this actual tale can do. Now, I'm using this wonderful annotated Christmas Carol. It's annotated by Michael Patrick Hearn. It's published by Norton and Company, and it's got all of these beautiful, let's see if you could see some of these prints that they have, original drawings that came from the 19th century, the etchings that accompanied the story when it was printed in newspapers. Let me see if I can find a nice big one. I don't know, something like that. It's an absolutely beautiful annotated version, and it actually gives a number of sort of footnotes to explain some of the 19th century isms that are all throughout the story. It's got a lot of wonderful anecdotes about life in mid-19th century Britain. If you don't know, Christmas Carol was published in 1843. And what's so interesting about it is that it actually served to revise some of the historic medieval Christmas customs that had largely been eradicated by the 17th century Puritans. So this is why G.K. Chesterton, the early 20th century English essayist, called Dickens the man who saved Christmas. That's also the title of a rather cute movie, if you have seen it. I think it's on, like, Hulu or Netflix or whatever you're using, Amazon. It just came out a few years ago, actually quite cute. But anyway, it's a profound story. So sit back, enjoy, and let me retell A Christmas Carol like you've never heard it before. You ready for this? Let's dive on in and see the treasures that we can discover within the pages of this timeless tale of sin and repentance, birth and new birth, death and resurrection, all culminating in the eternal splendors of festival and feast. Now, the first sentence of the story is absolutely fascinating, and it's key to understanding the whole story. Very simple. Marley was dead to begin with. There's no doubt whatever about that. That's your opening. That's a Call Me Ishmael for Christmas Carol, right? It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, right? So Marley was dead to begin with. There is no doubt whatever about that. Now, if you think it through, what a strange way to begin a story centered on the celebration of a birth. Why would Dickens begin a Christmas story, a story that centers on a birth, with a death? But again, what's so interesting here is that the theme of death stalks the Christmas Carol. It shows its grim and shrouded form in the last of the three ghosts, right? The phantom spirit that appears as a grim reaper, right? Tiny Tim dies. A poor little boy, tiny little boy dies as his parents weep over him. It's death stalks the story. And the narrator of the tale is, in fact, insistent on death's role in this story. Marley was dead to begin with. There is no doubt whatever about that. There is no doubt that Marley was dead. This must be distinctly understood, or nothing wonderful can come of the story I'm going to relate. So that's how Dickens begins the novel. And so the story actually opens up at a funeral, Jacob Marley's funeral. And after describing the funeral, Dickens extends this death-like motif to the corpse-like description of perhaps the most unlikely of Christmas heroes, Ebenezer Scrooge, the miserly moneylender. Keep that in mind, moneylender who hates all things Christmas. Listen to how Dickens describes Scrooge. This is so good. Oh, he was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone, Scrooge. A squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner, hard and sharp as flint, from which no steel had ever struck out generous fire, secret and self-contained and solitary as an oyster. The cold within him froze his features, nipped his pointed nose, shriveled his cheek, stiffened his gait, made his eyes red, his thin lips blue, and spoke out shrewdly in his grating voice. A frosty rime was on his head and on his eyebrows and his wiry chin. He carried his own low temperature always about with him. He iced his office during the dog days and didn't thaw it 1 degree at Christmas. Did you catch that? So you'll notice Dickens fleshes out what he calls this covetous old sinner as a cold and rigor mortis-like cadaver. The literary theorist Anthony Esselin, this is what he commented: everything about him suggests a skeletal skinniness, constriction, confinement, the dreary routine of sin, a walking death. Isn't that cool? That's Scrooge, a walking death. So that's the first key to understanding this amazing story. Death stalks its pages. Death stalks its pages precisely because Ebenezer Scrooge himself is depicted as a walking cadaver. Also, another key to understanding this story is this. Think about how Scrooge and Jacob Marley, his partner, think about how they acquired their wealth. How did they make their money? Who knows? Put it in the chat. How did they make their money? They made their money as debt collectors. They made their money as debt collectors. So they purchased the bad accounts of creditors and then used the law to confiscate as much as possible from the debtors. Now, think about why that's so amazing. What a wonderful job, if you think it through, for someone like Ebenezer Scrooge. Because the irony here is that it did not occur either to Ebenezer or Jacob Marley, didn't occur to either one of them, that perhaps they are the ones who have incurred an unpayable debt. Scrooge and Marley are actually the real debtors whose debts have not been forgiven. So that's the opening scene, a funeral and a skeletal corpse-like description of Scrooge. Then in the next scene, Scrooge he's in his cold, dark, dank counting office with his clerk, Bob Cratchit. And one thing you'll notice throughout the scene, what's so cool, is that Scrooge is the only one in the entire scene who's never cold. Scrooge is never, ever, ever cold. And that's just an extension of the cadaver-like description of him, right? The coldness of his heart prevents him from feeling the cold that everyone else feels. And so he and Cratchit are there busy working in this cold, dark counting office. And all of a sudden, someone walks in and breaks the silence and shouts out, "A Merry Christmas, Uncle! God save you!" Now, this is one of my favorite characters. It's his exuberant nephew, Fred, who loves his uncle and who every year comes to his counting house, right, to greet him with that precise greeting, "A Merry Christmas, Uncle, God save you." But what makes this Christmas so special is that that greeting isn't just in the form of a prayer, right? "Merry Christmas, Uncle, God save you." It's not just in the form of a prayer. This Christmas, it's going to turn out to be a prophecy. "Merry Christmas, Uncle, God save you." Note, by the end of the story, what's going to happen? Ebenezer will have a Merry Christmas, and as we will find out, God will save him. So the prayer transfigures into a prophecy. Nevertheless, old Scrooge's response to that prophecy, that prayer over him, was his iconic "Bah, humbug." But despite Scrooge's protests, Fred remains resolute. He's not merely come to wish glad tidings upon his uncle, but to actually invite him to dinner. "Don't be angry, Uncle. Come, dine with us tomorrow for Christmas." Now, this is huge because we're going to see that feasts and banquets are all throughout the story. Feasts and banquets fill this story. It's one of my favorite themes in A Christmas Carol. The Christmas banquet is literally everywhere. Now, what is the Christmas banquet ultimately? Again, you guys tell me in the chat, what is the Christmas banquet ultimately? Theologically, what are liturgical feasts? What are they foretastes of? Well, they all ultimately point to the messianic banquet of Isaiah 25 and the marriage supper of the Lamb at the end of the book of Revelation. This is the feast of feasts to which we are all invited, an invitation that calls all of us to our heavenly and eternal home. So in the story, in the Christmas Carol, this invitation to dine, this call to feast, is first brought into Scrooge's life by his nephew Fred, but it foreshadows the fourfold ghostly visits, right? Including Jacob Marley, the fourfold ghostly visits he'll later receive that evening, all of whom will invite Scrooge to feast, ultimately in God's heavenly banquet. So, in light of that, note Scrooge's response. Guess what Scrooge says to Fred in response to the invitation to come dine with him. He tells Fred that he would rather be damned to hell before he attends such a feast. He'd rather be damned to hell. So, again, we're getting this drama more and more clearly unfolding here. We have a prayer and prophecy for a Merry Christmas and God's salvation. And the response from Scrooge is he'd rather be damned to hell. But listen to this interaction, because Fred hasn't given up on him. He continues to probe old Scrooge as to why he's so bitter, why he's so cold. And listen to this exchange. "But why?" cried Scrooge's nephew. "Why? Why won't you come and dine with us?" Scrooge said, "Why did you get married?" "Because I fell in love." Because you fell in love, growled Scrooge, as if that were the only one thing in the world more ridiculous than a Merry Christmas. Good afternoon. Did you catch it? Scrooge's refusal to come dine with Fred, his own nephew, is ultimately rooted in Scrooge's rejection of love. Again, this is so key to this story. His cold, cadaver-like appearance is a result of a life that's amputated itself from the infinite life of love. And we see this again when, after Fred leaves, Ebenezer chides to church wardens who come to his office petitioning alms for the poor. And when Ebenezer told them that he would give them nothing, it was an inconceivable response. They didn't quite understand it. So they said, "Oh, you wish to be anonymous?" And Scrooge answered, and this is key, "I wish to be left alone." And he throws them out. I want to be left alone. This is hell. Hell is the end of relationship. Hell is the absence of relationship when we are truly, ultimately alone. And then he casts out a singing child from the doorway. Again, children appear all throughout the Christmas Carol. There's a little boy singing for, again, some alms outside the doorway of his office. It's basically become a money counting temple, if you think it through, right? So he's on his table counting his money, counting his coins. It's become a money counting temple. And the child interrupted him while he was counting his money. And so he got up and he shooed the child away, threatening to beat him, basically. But again, what's so beautiful here is that the child was singing these lyrics. The lyrics that he lists here is, God rest ye merry gentlemen, may nothing you dismay. Remember Christ our Savior was born on Christmas Day to save us all from Satan's power when we were gone astray. That's a pretty extraordinary song to be hearing in light of Fred's blessing on Scrooge, right? His prophetic prayer. So we could see the story in microcosm here already. We're seeing God's love poured out in the birth of Christ and offered in an invitation to an eternal banquet, and Scrooge's blatant and deliberate rejection of that love. Then when Scrooge goes home later that night on Christmas Eve, the description of his home, as you may have guessed, is something that looks more akin to a funeral parlor than a home. Actually, Dickens describes the house as a dark and dreary funeral parlor with a staircase that you could fit a hearse broadside. So, and a manner comparable to what C.S. Lewis once described hell as. He once described hell as being locked from inside. Behold, I stand at the door and knock, but we've locked the door. We don't want to open it. Hell is locked from indoors. And that's very interesting because we see Scrooge going into his bedroom and he closed his doors and he locks himself in and he double locks himself in, which was not his custom, we're told, but he wanted to be secured against any surprise. Again, brilliant, because as with Fred's intrusion earlier that evening, as we know, surprised Scrooge shall be. Now, Scrooge is, of course, first visited by the ghost of his former business partner, Jacob Marley. And commentators have interpreted this scene in an amazing way. There are a number of clues that suggest that Dickens is imagining Jacob Marley as an alternative ending to the parable of the rich man and Lazarus in Luke chapter 16, verses 19 to 31. So this is an alternative telling of that parable in that now the rich man is actually allowed to visit his brother to warn him of his impending punishment. It's so interesting. Marley and Scrooge are depicted at the beginning of the story as actually sharing a very fraternal relationship, Scrooge being his sole friend and sole mourner. And in the parable, the rich man was told that Moses and the prophets were enough to warn his brothers. That's why he wasn't allowed to go back to warn his brothers of their, the Hades like experience that waits them when they die if they don't repent. It's very interesting. We're told in Luke that they have Moses and the prophets to instruct them. Well, in this story, Scrooge is sitting by a fireplace in his bedroom, and it's illustrated with Moses and the prophets, as it were. It's illustrated with all of these biblical scenes, this fireplace. It says, quote, "There were Cain's and Abel's, Pharaoh's daughters, queens of Sheba, angelic messengers descending through the air on cloud like featherbeds, Abraham's, Belshazzar's, apostles putting off to sea in boats, hundreds of figures to attract his thoughts, and yet that face of Marley." This is talking about the what he saw on the door knocker on his front door. That face of Marley, 7 years dead, came like the ancient prophet's rod and swallowed the whole. And we're actually told when the spirit of Jacob Marley is talking to Scrooge, Marley says to him, "I requested to see you. I came here to warn you." Said, "I'm here tonight to warn you that you have a chance and hope of escaping my fate, a chance and hope of my procuring Ebenezer." That's what it literally says, the chance and hope of my procuring Ebenezer. This is one of the few times Scrooge is referred to in the entire story by his Christian name, which means the Lord is my help, right? The biblical prophets set stones as a memorial to remind Israel how God was faithful and led them out of their adversities. And these stones were called Ebenezer's. If the parable of the rich man and Lazarus is the inspiration behind Jacob Marley, then he's not come to merely warn Ebenezer. If you think it through, what's he also doing? If you know the parable, he's not just warning Ebenezer, he's inviting him. He's inviting him once again to a banquet, right? Because the parable of the rich man and Lazarus is bookended with a banquet motif. So first describing the rich man who feasted sumptuously, continuously, and then a banquet is implied in the description of Lazarus reclining by Abraham's side, right? Note that this dining invitation is actually underscored by Scrooge's earlier encounter with Jacob Marley when he saw him on the knocker of his front door, right? He's when he stared at his front door as he was walking up to it to unlock it, he saw the knocker, but the description is he no longer was a knocker. It suddenly became Marley's face. Well, again, what's the echo there? "Behold, I stand at the door and knock," right? Revelation 3:20. "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice and open the door, I will come into him and I will sup with him and he with me." Scrooge, of course, is then promised visitation by a sequence of 3 spirits. There are many literary commentators who see this threefold visitation as having a fascinating parallel to Dante's Divine Comedy. Any of you who've read Dante's Divine Comedy, it's also organized according to a threefold journey that leads Dante to his own ultimate divine encounter, from Inferno to Purgatory to Paradise. And he's accompanied by 3 spiritual guides through that process. Well, similarly, A Christmas Carol is structured according to a threefold spiritual encounter, these 3 spirit guides: the ghost of Christmas past, the ghost of Christmas present, and of course, the ghost of Christmas yet to come, which culminates in Scrooge's own ultimate sort of divine encounter, as we shall see. Now, with the first spirit, the Ghost of Christmas Past, we are finally privy to the origin of Scrooge's rejection of love. As it turns out, he rejects love because love first rejected him. So we with Scrooge go back to the old schoolhouse where he grew up as a child, which was being vacated for the Christmas season as it was every year, but he had to stay behind, right? The school is not quite deserted, the ghost said. There is a solitary child neglected by his friends. He is still there. Scrooge said he knew, and he began to cry. Now, that's a beautiful line. It's incredibly subtle. But every time I read this story, it pops out to me. You rarely see it in any of the movie adaptations. But in the book, when Scrooge sees himself as a young boy, all alone, deserted, staying by himself all throughout the Christmas season in that boarding school, when Scrooge sees himself as that little boy in the book, he begins to cry. He begins to weep. So right away, it's difficult not to sympathize with this old miser, this covetous old sinner, right? We find that he had been abandoned by his father. He was left alone for all these Christmases. And our hearts just ache for the betrayal of love he must have felt. So, he hears this Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. God save you. Come and dine with us. And the only thing he's ever experienced of Christmas is being alone. That's it. In the cold. As a little boy. Now, this scene is actually, I'm going to keep saying that. This is my all-time favorite scene. I love them all. I'm trying to elevate all of these scenes communicate how all of these scenes are just elevated in my imagination here. But this is one of my favorite scenes because, and strap yourselves in, this will blow you away. If you know the story, you know who's about to burst in again. This is the wonderful thing about A Christmas Carol is Scrooge's life is constantly getting interrupted. It's constantly getting, his shut door is constantly getting burst through. And I know we all experience that. And I know we all experience it and react to it like Scrooge does, which is leave me alone. Stop. I'm doing something. But let's just take a cut. This is why we have Christmas. Let's take a few steps back and realize that every time Scrooge's life is interrupted, it is for his blessing. So this time, instead of Fred rushing in, it's his mother, Scrooge's sister, an ecstatic young girl named Fan. Some editions have it as Fran. As I understand it, is originally Fan without the R. Either way. She rushes into the abandoned schoolhouse to greet her brother and invite him home. Listen to what she says. I've come to bring you home, dear brother, said the child, clapping her tiny hands and bending down to laugh. To bring you home, home, home. Home, little Fan, returned the boy. Yes, said the child, brimful of glee. Home for good and all. You can hear Fred in her, or better, you can hear her in Fred, right? Home for good. Home forever and ever. Father's so much kinder than he used to be, that home's like heaven. He spoke so gently to me one dear night when I was going to bed that I was not afraid to ask him once more if you might come home. And he said, yes, you should. And so he sent me in a coach to bring you home. Did you hear what she said? Home is like what? Put it in the chat. Home's like heaven. That's Ebenezer's dear little sister, Fan, who we find out died. She died very young, most likely giving birth to Fred, Ebenezer's nephew, who invited him, the original one, to invite him to dinner. But the reason why I love this scene so much, did you catch the overlapping of the scene, the powerful double entendre of the scene? What just happened there? What did Fan just do there? She just invited little Ebenezer home again. She ran into that school, that abandoned schoolroom, and invited little Ebenezer home. What did Fan just do there? She re-invited old Ebenezer back home. Home is like heaven. It's time to come home. Isn't that amazing? Now, the foretaste of such an invitation is anticipated by the Christmas Eve celebration hosted by good old Fezziwig. That's Ebenezer's former employer. Again, a wonderful character who I love. And it's at this feast, in the midst of its dances and games, its mince pies and ale, that we first learn of Ebenezer's love, his betrothal to a beautiful young girl named Belle. And Belle means beautiful. Now we know, and we get a good sense of why he has rejected love. It's because in the end, through his own pursuit of wealth and avarice, he ends up actually rejecting her. And when he has to relive the moment that she agreed to release him from their engagement vows, Scrooge heard her words, "I release you with a full heart for the love of him you once were." I release you with a full heart for the love of him you once were. Now, those of you who know your theology know that is extremely powerful. It's the illusion of sin and evil is what's known in Latin as privatio boni, or the absence of good. In other words, evil is not a thing in itself. Evil is not a thing in itself, but rather the perversion or rotting of a previously good thing. So it's like a hole in a shirt, right? There is in Ebenezer an original beauty. We've seen it now. That somewhere along the lines was marred, perhaps beyond all recognition. But even in his physical and moral old age, we can trace the fallen outlines of a beautiful man, of a good life. And so the next spirit or ghost, the arrival of the giant ghost of Christmas present, Ebenezer is just surrounded by all kinds of meats and sausages and mince pies and plum puddings and apples and oranges that made the chamber dim with their delicious steam. And through this spirit guide, Scrooge is invited subsequently to, you guessed it, 2 banquets. First one at the Cratchit home and then one at Fred's. Now, in stark contrast to the funerary description of Scrooge's house, the Cratchit home, though he's poor, is filled with riches, riches of bustling children and a happy mother, an excited Christmas dinner and the like. And when we meet Tiny Tim, whose diminutive underscores the seemingly insignificant tools that God uses to accomplish his purposes, right? He chooses the weak to he chooses the foolish to shame the wise, the weak to shame the strong. We see the connection between his crippled body and actually Scrooge's crippled soul. So somehow his father at one point ponders, Tim gets thoughtful sitting by himself so much and thinks the strangest things you've ever heard. He told me coming home that he hoped that the people saw him in the church because he was a cripple, and it might be pleasant to them to remember that upon Christmas Day, it is Christ who made lame beggars walk and blind men see. So Tiny Tim is a lived out parable of Scrooge's sort of dying and decaying moral and spiritual blindness, but a parable that reminds us of a little boy, of what the little boy abandoned by his father at the schoolhouse has become, but also what he could be, a redeemed soul that blesses and sings to God. And so, again, as Anthony Esolen points out, the child who made blind men see, the child born on this day who made blind men see, is opening the eyes of Ebenezer, that moral cripple. And that is a more astonishing miracle than the healing of a little lame boy. In fact, the lameness of the boy is the occasion of grace. The lameness of the boy is the occasion of grace. It opens the way into Scrooge's heart. Spirit, implored Scrooge, tell me if Tiny Tim will live. The ghost replied, I see a vacant seat in the poor chimney corner, and a crutch without an owner, carefully preserved. If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, the child will die. Unbeknownst to Scrooge, the ghost may indeed have had two children in mind. The one sitting lame at Christmas dinner, but also perhaps the young abandoned boy at the schoolhouse now with the crippled soul, who has yet to accept Fran's invitation to come home. Ebenezer then peers into the home of his nephew Fred, the very dinner he was invited to, filled with laughter and Christmas cheer, fun and games. Indeed, we find his guest Topper cheating playfully at Blind Man's Bluff, and with the help of Fred's wife, cornering her sister only to place a ring on her finger. So, of course, we're getting themes of a wedding banquet there. And as the bell struck 12, Ebenezer encountered the most menacing of all spirits, a phantom, indeed, the ghost of Christmas yet to come. And here now, the image of death is coming full circle. Scrooge sees and hears people talking on the street about someone who recently died. But the discussion involved not the slightest sense of compassion or remorse. They were all actually very happy about the man's death. And then he sees inside the Cratchit home and realizes that Tiny Tim has indeed died. And he hears one of the children reading from the scriptures aloud. And he took a child and set him down in the midst of them. Though grief-stricken, the family pledges to never quarrel again, given Tim's example of blessed endurance amidst adversity. And finally, Scrooge is confronted with his own mortality. The narrator tells us this: the ghost of Christmas future conducted him through several streets familiar to his feet. And as they went along, Scrooge looked here and there to find himself, but nowhere was he to be seen. So you get the premise of it. Scrooge is looking around. Where am I? Where am I in this Christmas future? He's looking for himself in all of these familiar settings, but he can't find himself. And then suddenly, upon seeing his own grave, he realizes two horrors. He realizes that he was the one who died, that the people on the street talked so callously and heartlessly about. And then secondly, he realized the most horrific of horrors, the most horrific of ironies. Despite being accompanied by ghosts throughout the night, all of a sudden now Ebenezer has realized that he himself has become the ghost. Standing over his own gravesite, he realizes he is now the ghost. And that is when Ebenezer becomes overwhelmed and he starts to cry again. Before his own gravesite, Ebenezer falls to the ground and cries out his confession. I promise I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach. And then notice the beautiful baptismal imagery here. Oh, tell me that I may sponge away the writing on this stone. Again, one of my favorite lines. Oh, tell me that I might sponge away the writing on the stone. It's the second time Ebenezer cries in the story. He first cried over seeing himself at the beginning of his life when he was rejected by his father. Now he's crying because he realizes he's lived a life now it is at the end of his life that has turned and rejected his heavenly Father. It's an incredibly emotional moment. And he implores the Spirit through tears to give him a second chance. And Ebenezer's tearful imploring is heard. He finds himself suddenly in his own bedroom, and unbeknownst to him, it's Christmas morning. And he cries out in delirious laughter and joy, I don't know what day of the month it is. I don't know how long I've been among the spirits. I don't know anything. I feel like quite a baby. Did you catch that? This is what makes Dickens so wonderful. Did you catch that? What does he feel like? I feel like a baby. This is the genius of Charles Dickens. What are we seeing here? We're seeing two births. The birth of Christ and the new birth of Ebenezer. Moreover, you'll notice that the death motif throughout the Christmas Carol has set the stage for the breaking in of Easter. The death motif, which remember he said very specifically, Dickens said, if you don't understand the role of death here, you're not going to understand this story. The death motif has set the stage for the breaking in of Easter in the midst of Christmas. Because you'll note, Christ is born and Scrooge has awakened from his own grave. And now what is he going to do? He's going to reverse the death of Tiny Tim, who Dickens tells us did not die. Ebenezer experiences a conflation of both Christmas and Easter in one and the same day. Hence, the gloom of the past night has been dispelled. Ebenezer opens up his window and cries out, "Golden sunlight, heavenly sky, sweet fresh air, merry bells, oh glorious, glorious." And in one of the most beautiful moments in the story, as he bathes in the sunlight of Christmas morning with his windows wide open, he suddenly bristles. The story tells us he gets cold. He said, "Ooh, it's cold. It's piping for the blood to dance to," he says. His heart has been so warmed over with divine love, he can once again feel the cold. And of course, what follows for both Tiny Tim and Ebenezer is they're feasting in a grand banquet with the Cratchit's feast supplied by Ebenezer himself. And as for Ebenezer, his own journey towards Fred's supper consisted of forgiving debts, giving to the poor, and attending church, blessing and singing to God. Perhaps singing "God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen." In the Patrick Swayze adaptation, that's exactly what he sings in church on Christmas morning. "God rest ye merry gentlemen, let nothing you dismay. For Jesus Christ our Savior was born on Christmas Day to save us all from Satan's power as we have gone astray." And then finally, he approached the home of Fred. Fred, awestruck, says, "Why, bless my soul, who's that?" It's I. It's your Uncle Scrooge. I've come to dinner. Will you let me in, Fred? Dickens says this, "Let him in. It's a mercy he didn't shake his arm off. He was at home in 5 minutes." He was at home, taking his place at the true and everlasting banquet. Ebenezer has finally come home. And that is one of my favorite stories of all, The Christmas Carol. And a Merry Christmas to all of you. Oh, Micah, do we have any questions or anything anybody wants to chat about? I just love it. I love that Christmas story more than anything else in all the world. We do have some questions. So Carol or comments, whatever you guys want. We have some time to hang out. Wishing you and your staff and family a blessed Christmas. Now that the spending bill got defeated, does that mean that Congress doesn't get that 40% pay raise? As I understand it, Carol, that is exactly what it means. I heard somebody suggest, you know what, Congress should not be allowed to get even paid unless they have at least a 50% approval rating. I will give them that. I will say, look, let them get paid, but they don't get a dime of a raise unless they have at least a 50% approval rating. If they are not representing the people, if all they are representing, donors and lobbyists, they don't deserve a darn thing. So yes, that apparently is off the table permanently. And you guys did that. I don't know if you saw my first video today. You did that. You pushed back so hard on them, like you did with Pete Hegseth, for example, or when they were coming out saying, "Oh, I'm not going to vote for Robert Kennedy," or "I'm not going to vote for Tulsi Gabbard." You guys push back so hard. They're like, "Oop, I mean, of course I am. Of course I am." So you guys did that. So that's your Christmas present. You earned it. ROT Corp. In honor of Gator M song number 2 on the TTNM holiday album, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer played in the background. Elon Musk came to America. He was the richest man in the world. And if you ever saw him, you would say he's even more American than you. All the other liberals used to laugh and say, eat the rich, even though Elon made Tesla. So he bought Twitter and named it X. ROT, you're the best, dude. You are the best. What would we have done if he did not buy Twitter? Can you imagine how much that changed the world? I mean, and everybody was laughing at 44 billion. That's so overpriced. 44 billion. What idiot would ever do that? He knew what he was doing. He's all about saving civilization. Why does he want to go to Mars? Why is he obsessed with getting to Mars? Because he wants to save civilization. He knows civilization is just one meteor strike away from annihilation. He wants to save civilization. So everything he does is for the purpose of saving civilization. So I think that's why we love him so much. Because that's honestly, that's what animates me every day. To get in front of this microphone, get in front of this camera, chatting with you guys every day. I try to bring the information you need to further and foster a vibrant civilizational renewal. So that's why I love him so much. That's awesome, ROT. You're the best, man. That is so good. Trent, for a month before the election, I did very little, but wait for your next video. Thank you, Trent. The best election predictive analysis. You seem discouraged by doomers who doubted the outcome, but you and others were optimistic about a red wave in 2022. Now you say woke's dead and we're in a golden age when the establishment's out of power. But how can we be sure? The Dominion's clever, firmly entrenched, ruthless. What say you to the doomers who doubt we fully and completely won? Yeah, no, there's always, well, I think only the confident prevail. Number one. So confidence is actually a strategic orientation, because it is only the optimistic that ultimately prevail. It's the pessimistic that basically retreat in their corners, name a pet rat, and then just basically turn into a skeleton after 6 months. And again, we know that. That's the Admiral Stockdale's principle. Is it John? I'm trying to remember. Stockdale, who said that the Stockdale principle basically argued that the two kinds of people that never made it out of prisoner of war camps, James Stockdale, the two kind of people that never made it out of prisoner of war camps that he faced during Vietnam were the naive optimists, but also the doomer pessimists. So what you have to do is you have to blend the two. You have to be absolutely dramatically sober about the dire nature of the threat you face, and at the same time, never lose hope that you will prevail. Now, I believe that conservatives, there are plenty of voices out there that are doomers and that are going to black pill you. Plenty of them out there. I wanted to be the voice that encouraged you and inspired you and gave you the hope that we will prevail. That's what I do. That's my thing. Now, you know, I will tell you if things are bad. I will tell you that. I can't even count how many election integrity special live streams we had. And I brought in Ray D'Agostino, the Lancaster County election official, who was on the front lines. They actually caught election fraud right in Lancaster County. He was there on the front line. We brought him back on. What was it? The Intercept, the far left Intercept that that Glenn Greenwald used to work for. They wrote a big hit piece on us after and on him after we invited him on. We took the integrity of the election and its very real likelihood of being violated very seriously. So we tried to be as sober-minded as possible in terms of the dire threats that we experience or possibly experience. But at the same time, I wanted to make sure that this channel provided for you a ray of hope every time you tuned in, a solid ray of hope. Yeah, there's been a couple of times where I blackpilled. I'll be honest. I remember when what's his name, Scott McAfee, the judge in the Fulton County Fannie Willis lawfare, when he said, okay, Fannie Willis and Nathan Wade, you've both been found acting completely unethically and inappropriately in such a way that where you both deserve to be suspended from this case. Thank heaven she has been as of, was it today or yesterday? I can't. Yeah, I think it was today, right? So you both deserve to be suspended from this, disqualified from this case. But as long as one of you resigns, I'll let the other one stay. And that's when I was just like, wait, you both deserve to be disqualified, but one of you could stay? And I remember, I don't know if you guys remember that. I came out and said, guys, I'm just black-pilled. There is nothing optimistic for me to say here. Our system is as corrupt to the core. How on earth do you look into a courtroom seriously as a judge with any semblance of reputable integrity and say you both deserve to be disqualified because you're having an affair and spending money on each other and taxpayer money to boot and on Caribbean cruises and all the like? You both deserve, but you know what? No, I'm going to let this keep going. Just one of you needs to go. Decide which one has to go and the other one can stay. I mean, I was just like, that's it. I mean, how do you fight against a system like this? How do you fight against a system that says heads I win, tails you lose? So I can get there. You know that, Trent. I can get there. I will always be honest with you. But generally speaking, 99% of the time, I'm going to try to be that Christmas star, and I'm going to try to give you hope and optimism rooted in fact, rooted in scholarship, to give you the assurance that we're going to make it. We're going to do it. So that's my shtick. How do I know? Now, I said that there was going to be a red wave in 2022. Now, I'm going to push back on you on that with Trent. All the data says, yes, we're getting a red wave, just like all the data said we were going to get a red wave here with 2024. The difference, we all found out the hard way. The difference is in 2022, now with the working class vote shifting over to the Republicans, that also entails the fact that the low to no propensity voter is now ours. And we learned that the hard way. That we overlooked that in our analysis. Absolutely admitted, fully confessed, as it were. We overlooked the fact that the low to no prop voter, the voter that only shown up maybe one or no times in the last 4 elections, they're now our voter. They used to be the Democrats, and they would stay home during the midterms, and Republicans would crush it in the midterms, like 1994, 2010, 2014. No more. Now we have to go out and get that vote out. Now they'll come out for Trump, and we had data to show that the low to no prop voters were voting early. They were banking their votes. So thank you, Scott Pressler, and thank you, Cliff Maloney, and I mean, thank you, Laura Trump and Mike Watley and everybody involved with banking that early vote. You did amazing work. We just didn't have that, unfortunately, with Ronna McDaniel. So we had the numbers in terms of the people who, if they voted, would have voted our way. The problem is they just didn't come out and vote in 2022 because they're low to no prop. That hopefully will never happen again. How do we know things are working out now? Well, of course, we don't. Again, it's a hope that we are prevailing. That is the golden age. And there's But there's clearly signs that this is not 2016. This is a new era. The signs are Democrats are leaderless. Republicans are largely galvanized now around Trump. Remember, back in 2016, Ted Cruz didn't even like Trump. Nobody liked Trump. All 16 of the GOP's finest that he beat were still pissed at him. They hated him, and they were going to get even with him. All right. That's gone. Those days are over. They're 100% behind Trump. They know this is Trump's party now. They know this is J.D. Vance's party. They know this is Elon Musk's party. He has the smartest man in the world with him. He's got the richest man in the world with him. He's got RFK. He's got Tulsi. He's got this whole wing of Democrats now, the populist left with him. It is an incredibly formidable force. And all I have to see is, just look at what happened last night with that omnibus porculus bill that Mike Johnson was trying to ram down our throats. That got defeated because of the new MAGA coalition that's mobilized around technopopulism, that can be mobilized very quickly and in mass in ways that the swamp has never even imagined facing. And I just think the combination of Trump's political strength, his literal rebirth from Butler, Pennsylvania, and the Doge. I just think the combination, and Democrats being leaderless, the legacy media basically in tatters. George Stephanopoulos looks like he's not coming back next year. I just think we're unstoppable at this point. And I think we need to act that way, and the offensive has to be absolutely. It has to be so awesome that we'll be talking about it for a generation. That's how amazing it has to be. And I think if we're just focused that way, it will be. I do. Thank you, Tret. RT Corp, wait a second. Dr. Charlie talking about Scrooge or Joe Biden? in the cadaver-like description? Yes, I know. It was so funny. I was on Twitter or X. I'm so old. I just always call it Twitter, but I was on X today, and it had a picture of a guy. Who was it now? It was like the best scene from a movie. It was a picture of the best scene of a character before they're about to die. And which one was this now? I can't remember because I just started scrolling. He's like, put it down in the comments. So I started scrolling through it, and it was what's his name, Quaid in Independence Day, when he's about to go crash his spaceship and into or crash his fighter jet into the spaceship, and he says, I'm coming back, and there's just all these really cool final words of heroic deaths and so forth. And then someone just had to put Joe in that look of when he was outside that night. I guess they were lighting the tree, and he just looked like he was straight out of something like Tales from the Crypt. And he's like, yeah, I know it's not a movie, but it's like, so yeah, I know what you mean. You're thinking along the same lines as others. Bert, hello, Dr. Steve. If I buy a few border panels and donate to the Texas walls, would the IRS allow me to deduct them on my taxes? I do not know, but they should absolutely allow you to do that. I don't know if you heard, but the warning's coming out now that any federal employee involved in that is going to be fired immediately on January 20th. So that'll be interesting to see. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people getting fired. Trent, I love when you say it's no longer left versus right, but top versus down struggle. I feel left versus right, stemming from the extreme communism versus fascism scales, always been a lie. No meaningful difference between Soviet socialism and German National Socialism. That's right. In the end, it's just managerialism, right? That's what Orrin McIntyre says. If you saw my interview with Orrin, they're just different flavors or forms of managerialism. A top-down managerial technocratic structure. It's always been only dominion versus freedom. Love it. Conservatives seems reactive, doomed to try, slowing inevitable progress toward the left or liberal. It's time to retire the word conservative in describing our movement. Is it time to go? I don't know. Maybe. I think I think it still carries some pedigree for people. We call ourselves the Courageous Conservative Club. Uh, we use Patriot a lot as well to try to do more of that, what you're talking about. I'll have to think about that. I think it's still, I think conservative has a nice connotation in that it acknowledges there are some things worthy of conserving. There are practices, beliefs, institutions of the past that are necessary to protect in the present so as to guarantee our human flourishing in the future. Past, present, and future all are entailed in this notion of conservatism. Also, conservatism does have this notion of return. That's very important. If you think about it, our civilization, our Western civilization, is really grounded in the two Homeric works of the Iliad and the Odyssey. And the Iliad its opening words in the Latin. It was originally Homeric Greek, but in Latin is in media re, in the midst of things, in the middle of things. What is it? It's a battle, and it's a battle that's happening far away from home. And the idea is the farther away you are from home, the more battles you have to fight, the more tenuous and the more adverse life becomes. But then the second great work is the Odyssey, the tales of Odysseus returning home. The Greek word is nostalgia, right? Nostalgia. It's his incredibly adventurous quest of returning home, and he has chance after chance after chance to turn back, and get distracted and stay on an island with a goddess and all that. And he says, no, I've got to go home to my wife and my family. I've got to return home. And that's good. I mean, if you think about it, that's the prodigal son, right? It's conservative liberalism, progressivism is all about the prodigal journey. And it always ends up in disaster. Conservatism is the way home. It's the way to return home and to find ultimately peace. Yes, we progress, absolutely, but we see entailed in progression always return, because we see at the end, the Omega is the Alpha. Again, the Bible begins in the garden and it ends in the garden. It begins with the tree of life, it ends with the tree of life, and in between is the cross, the tree of life restored. So because God is eternal and because we are rooted in eternal realities, our ending is our beginning. So the farther we progress, ironically, the closer we come home, if we have a right concept of progression. So that's the archaeofuture concept. So great, but great observation, Joe. Well, let's talk about it in 2025. Maybe we will retire it. After all that, after I say that, we can't retire it, right? Gator, who are the important people like SS, Medicare, VA that won't get paid if the government shuts down? There aren't any, Gator. They all get paid. They all get paid. Everybody knows it. They all get paid. It's all it's all not. I remember that, what was it, the 96 shutdown, 95, 96 shutdown with Gingrich and Clinton. And I remember I was teaching guitar back then, and I taught guitar to a group of lovely, wonderful government workers in Arlington, Virginia. I lived in Baltimore at the time. I traveled down there, and they were all enjoying it. They were all, as I understand, they were all getting paychecks. But they just didn't have to show up to work. So I think it's one big. I just think it's just one huge, what do you want to call it? Sham. I don't know. But Stephen, what do you think about President Putin's Wild West challenge to the West? Pick a target in Ukraine, install your best missile defense system, and we will send our Orshnik missile in and see if you can shoot it down. I love it. Put up or shut up NATO. Yeah. I haven't seen that. I missed that. Did he say that today? I mean, the last I heard is he's been reaching out to Trump, either directly or indirectly, certainly via Tucker. And and his foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov. They had a very interesting conversation. Sergei Lavrov is a brilliant diplomat, one of the best. He's been around for 20 years. We'll hopefully have peace. It looks good. If we don't, that will be a sign that the golden age has not come. If Trump gets caught in this, in the status quo of the NATO military-industrial complex, and we've got to keep supplying Ukraine, lest Putin end up in Poland. Stupid, idiotic comments like that. Then that will be a sign things are not going very well. It doesn't look like that. It looks like Trump is ready to put an end to this thing. So hopefully we won't have to find out. And yes, I would put my money on the Oreshnik. Yeah. Dr. Steve and Catherine, Dr. Steve, thank you for this evening. I almost didn't make it to the party. Thank you, Catherine. I'm glad you made it. Thank you, Catherine. That's so kind of you. Irene, or Irene in the Greek, right? Irene, where might I find the book that you read from today? Thank you for this beautiful story. Do you know, Irene, I got this at a used book sale. So I don't know where to get it. You might want to look it up. So that's the cover, the annotated Christmas Carol. Ex Libris is the publisher. Let's see. And it is edited with introduction, notes, and bibliography by Michael Patrick Hearn, Hearn. But I got this at a used book sale, and I've years ago, and I used to read to my kids from this, and it's got several different editions. It's fascinating. It's got a number of editions of the story, a short form, a long form, that kind of stuff. Lots of commentary, like the origin of Bah Humbug. I recall it was an old expression, obviously, but old English expression, but they give you the etymology behind it and all that good stuff. So there you go. I hope you find it. It is worth it. You'll love it. Let's see. Is it Felicita? Is there another cruise next year? And where? I believe they're putting something together for 2025. I believe it's going to be the Caribbean, but I don't know when. I'm not sure. So stay tuned. We will certainly tell you. But yes, we had an amazing cruise last time, the Mediterranean cruise. We had a bunch of Turley talkers come. I taught classes each day, and then we went on excursions. We had dinner together. It was awesome. It was wonderful. So yes, we'll let you guys know about that again for the next cruise. Trent, Dr. Turley, next presidential election may be a month prior to the big day. Could you help us out and work through the weekends? It was so hard to wait all weekend with none of your updates. God bless you, Trent. All right. Of course I'll do that. Anything for you guys. Of course. Anything for you. I'll work through the weekends in the month up. That's right. No rest for the weary. You know who worked darn hard was Rich Barris. I mean, all the pollsters and Mark Mitchell of Rasmussen, but Rich of the People's Pundit. I mean, they were tireless. The modelers, Christian Hines is one. I mean, they were working day in, day out. What are some others? I don't want to leave anybody up, but unfortunately I'm going to leave it. All the anime emojis or whatever that they have in their X profiles. They were amazing, and they were working, it seemed like 16-hour days, and giving us the best data out there. Now, there was, as you guys know, there were a lot of crap polls. There were a lot of nonsense surveys and polls, like Ann Seltzer, right, of the Des Moines Register, who's about to get sued, deservedly so. So we made sure to keep those far, far away from you. I explained to you why they were bad, why they were all exemplified response bias, and why some of them were just blatantly corrupt, like this Ann Seltzer poll just seemed to be without. I mean, it seemed to be so blatantly election interference. So yeah, we will do that. We'll see. The big thing is the strategy. It's going to be the off-year election for 2025. I mean, Virginia will have an election. It'll be very interesting to see what our good friends like Scott Presler or Cliff Maloney are going to be doing around that. And then they are totally serious about turning New Jersey red for 2026 and 2028. They are totally serious about that. And if we've got Pennsylvania, many believe Pennsylvania is the new Ohio. Looks like we've established the infrastructure to guarantee Pennsylvania be red from this point forward. If we take New Jersey and then the other two Rust Belt states, the so-called blue wall states, which will now be the new red wall states, Wisconsin and Michigan, they tend to vote the same way as Pennsylvania does. Certainly Wisconsin is moving that direction. But if we've got those states and then we take New Jersey, I mean, they are permanently locked out of the electoral college, and they won't see power for a generation. They're already saying they probably won't see majority in the Senate for a generation. Again, we will see. We will stay on top of it. And if anyone could screw it up, it's the Republicans. So, yes, Cliff and Scott. Did I mess up names there? Forgive me if I did. Our producer, Mike, would say it's Cliff and Scott. So, all right, that looks like it's about it, gang. A wonderful Merry Christmas. I'll see you tomorrow morning. We'll have our live stream Friday morning, our final one before the Christmas season. I might be able to sneak in a video probably on Christmas Eve. I might say a little hello and just see what's going on. No, Mike is saying, nope, I'm just giving them a shout out. Haha. Yes. Yeah. Oh, good. I thought I messed up names. Yeah. So we'll do one last live stream tomorrow and just kind of wrap up the week's news. Amazing week. It's been an incredible week. And then, gang, I will talk to you after Christmas. I love each and every one of you. God bless you. And God bless all of us, right? God bless us, everyone, as Tiny Tim would say. I love you all. Have a wonderful Christmas. God bless.